Thank you for spending a little time with this story. I hope it gives you a calm, meaningful break today. If you enjoy stories about Earth and humanity, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves emotional science fiction. This story begins at Kepler Gate, where one forgotten body forces the galaxy to remember the truth. Earth's smallest promise terrified the Galactic Council. The first thing Vale noticed at Kepler Gate was not the fire damage. It was the quiet. The civilian transfer station had once been built for noise. Families crossed it on their way to new colonies. Cargo crews argued over docking windows. Pilgrims slept on benches under old arrival boards, while translators sang over each other in hundreds of voices. Now the station turned slowly above the dark edge of neutral space. Its outer rings were blackened, its docking arms bent inward, and its public windows had blown out into the stars. Nathan stood inside a pressurized rescue sleeve with his helmet sealed and one gloved hand resting on the side rail. Behind him waited the Earth recovery team. Ahead of him waited the Galaxy Council Rescue Authority, already impatient. Nathan was not a soldier. He was not a minister. His title sounded less dramatic than either, but in moments like this, it mattered more than many people understood. Nathan Vale was Earth's special representative for humanitarian return and interstellar missing persons. When people died far from home and their bodies crossed borders, species, laws, and politics, Nathan's office made sure they did not vanish into convenience. Earth had been invited to Kepler Gate for that reason. The station had served travelers from several systems, including a small number of human workers. The Council had declared the explosion a technical failure. Earth had accepted the invitation to help identify the dead, return any human citizens if they were found, and assist other families when possible. That was the official purpose. The real pressure was visible in the way the Council crews moved. They were not searching for the truth. They were clearing an embarrassment. Kepler Gate mattered because it stood in the kind, a place powerful governments like to call neutral. Neutral meant no single state owned it. Neutral also meant every powerful system that used it had a reason to keep its records clean. If a station failed, it was cheaper to call the failure technical. If travelers died, it was safer to call the dead unfortunate. If old war debris turned up in the walls, it was easiest to seal the walls and move traffic somewhere else. Nathan had seen that habit before. Earth had learned it the hard way during its first decades in wider space. Human crews were often told that council procedure was older, wiser, and too complex for young worlds to question. Earth was expected to be grateful for access and quiet about discomfort. Nathan had built his career by refusing to confuse gratitude with obedience. Families knew his office. They knew the gray envelopes, the late calls, the wrong names, and the forms that turned grief into a claim number. Nathan had started in that work after a mining accident near Mars. A contractor had tried to list 5 missing workers as unrecoverable material to avoid a longer search. Nathan had been a junior legal officer then. He still remembered the face of a father who asked for only one thing. "Tell me where my daughter is," the man had said, "even if the answer breaks me." That memory walked with Nathan through every wreck. Tovin Sayre, the council rescue administrator, floated beside the access hatch with a silver marker on his chest plate. His voice came through the shared channel, flat and clipped. "Representative Vale, your team has already received the human casualty list. None of your citizens are in this section. We are prepared to close it." Nathan looked past him into the ruined corridor. Panels had peeled from the walls. Emergency foam clung to the floor in gray sheets. A child's travel cup drifted near the ceiling, caught in a loop of weak air. "This was a civilian station," Nathan said. "We do not close a civilian section because it stops being convenient." Tovin turned his helmet slightly. The motion was small, but Nathan heard the annoyance behind it. "The Galaxy Council has jurisdiction here. Earth is present as a humanitarian observer. Then observe us doing humanitarian work." For a moment, no one answered. Nathan did not raise his voice. He had learned that anger helped the powerful more than the dead. Anger gave them a way to dismiss the person asking the question. Calm made them answer it. He signaled Mara Ellen to bring the portable scanner forward. Mara was Earth's senior biological identification specialist on the mission. She was slight, sharp-eyed, and patient in the way of people who had spent years working with families waiting behind closed doors. "We have enough air for 2 hours in this sleeve," Mara said privately over the Earth channel. "The Council wants this corridor sealed in 20 minutes. "Then we use the 20 minutes well," Nathan replied. They moved inside. The first bodies they found were already marked by Council tags. 2 cargo workers from nearest Vale. 1 station mechanic from a trade moon called Selvin. 3 travelers whose families had been notified. The work was grim but ordinary. Nathan checked each tag, made sure the names matched, and made sure no remains were grouped under vague language. He hated vague language around death. He had seen what it did. A person became material. A mother became biological matter. A child became lost volume. A family received a sealed notice that did not name what they had lost. Near the end of the corridor, Mara stopped. "Nathan." "Side hatch." The hatch was half crushed, its rim warped by heat. Behind it was a service pocket meant for emergency storage, not shelter. A body was wedged inside. One arm was locked around the inner brace, as if she had been holding the door against pressure. The dead person was alien, female, by the biological markers Mara identified. Her skin had once carried pale copper striping, now faded beneath burn scars and cold damage. She wore no uniform, no armor, and no official identification band. One hand was closed so tightly that the fingers had stiffened around whatever she held. Tovin arrived behind them. "Unregistered remains," he said at once. "No citizenship signal, no station manifest match, no military code. This will be processed under sanitation protocol." Nathan did not move. Mara knelt, as well as the low gravity allowed. She scanned the body twice, then a third time. "No active identity," she said. "But the blank is too clean." Tovin's tone hardened. "The explosion erased many records." "Explosions damage records," Mara said. "They do not polish them." Nathan looked at the closed hand. "Can you open it without damage?" Mara worked slowly. The fingers gave way one by one. Inside the palm was a strip of woven fabric, charred at the edges. The pattern was not casual decoration. It had lines, knots, and a central mark repeated 3 times, like a family sign or a route marker. Wrapped under the fabric was a small civilian recorder. It had no military casing and no hard shell. It was only a cheap memory core, cracked almost through. Mara connected a reader. Static spilled into the channel. Then, for less than 3 seconds, came a sound that changed the air in the corridor. "Children." There were not many words. Not enough to understand. Just small voices, frightened but alive, followed by an adult woman's breath and a broken syllable that might have been a name. Tovin reached for the recorder. Nathan caught his wrist before the administrator touched it. "Careful," Nathan said. "That is evidence of identity. It is a damaged, personal device attached to unregistered remains. It is a dead person holding a family cloth and the voices of children." Tovin pulled his wrist back. "Representative Vale, sentiment is not procedure. Neither is disposal before identification. There is no identification. Then Earth will try to find one." The council personnel behind Tovin exchanged looks. One of them made a soft clicking sound that Nathan's translator rendered as amusement. Tovin looked directly at him. "You intend to take an unknown alien body across council space because your species dislikes an ugly category?" Nathan kept his eyes on the dead woman's hand. "Earth will take her home if a home can still be found. No one will thank you. That is not a condition of the work." The helmet camera on the rescue sleeve recorded every word. Tovin did not understand why Nathan asked the recovery crew to pause for a formal custody log. To the council administrator, it looked like another human delay, another ritual placed in the path of efficiency. But Nathan made the words clear for the record. An unknown adult female had been found in a civilian service pocket. A cultural marker had been recovered. A personal recorder had been recovered. Disposal was refused pending identification. Mara looked at him once when he said adult female. The body was damaged enough that many officials would have avoided even that much humanity. Nathan said it anyway because the smallest true word mattered. A category could erase. A correct word could hold the line until a name arrived. Before they left the corridor, Nathan asked the council crew to search the adjoining maintenance chute. Tobin objected that no heat signature remained. Nathan answered that dead people did not always announce where the living had gone. The search found 3 small handprints burned into the emergency foam near an escape seam. They were not enough to prove a child's survival or death. They were enough to make the recorder's voices harder to dismiss. Tobin saw Nathan photograph the marks. "You are building a case," he said. "I am preserving context." Context becomes accusation very quickly with humans. Nathan sealed the image. Only when someone is afraid of what the context says. At the time, it seemed like a small thing. One exhausted human representative refusing one administrative disposal order in a burned corridor at the edge of neutral space. By the next day, the clip had reached Earth. It spread first through recovery workers and families of missing spacers, then through veterans of disaster zones, then through people who had never left Earth but understood what it meant for a family to wait for a name. The phrase came from an ordinary viewer in Ohio. It was typed under the rescue feed, then shared faster than any official statement. "Bring them home." Within hours, it appeared on public boards in Chicago, Nairobi, Manila, Sao Paulo, and New Mumbai. It appeared beside photographs of empty chairs, old uniforms, unopened birthday messages, and memorial shelves where families kept the things of people who had never returned. Nathan did not see the first wave. He was still at Kepler Gate, completing the transfer of the unnamed dead woman into Earth's humanitarian custody. Far away, in the inner chambers of the Galaxy Council, Counselor Varek Som watched the same footage in silence. Varek was elegant, patient, and old enough to have survived several political eras by knowing when to speak softly. He replayed the moment Nathan lifted the cloth from the dead woman's hand. He froze the image, enlarged the woven pattern, and dismissed every aide except one. "Find the source of that cloth," he said. The aide hesitated. "It may be nothing, Counselor." Varek's silver eyes narrowed. If it were nothing, Earth would not have found it. By the time Nathan returned to Earth orbit, the unnamed woman had already become a problem. The humanitarian facility that received her body sat beneath the Atlantic elevator ring. It was a quiet platform reserved for the dead who had crossed too many borders. No flags were flown there. No reporters were allowed inside. Nathan preferred the place for that reason. It knew how to be quiet without being cold. Mara Ellen met him in the identification lab with tired eyes and a hard expression. The dead woman's body rested in a transparent preservation cradle behind her. The cloth and recorder sat inside separate evidence fields. "You should sit down," Mara said. Nathan did not. "Tell me." Her identity was not destroyed by the Kepler Gate explosion. It was removed before the explosion. Nathan looked through the glass at the body. "Removed how?" Mara brought the pattern onto the wall display. There are traces of an old council military erasure key inside the biological registry field. It wiped citizenship markers, transit records, and origin indicators. Whoever used it knew exactly what systems would be checked first. Nathan was silent long enough that Mara lowered her voice. "This is not an accident victim who lost her papers. Someone made her impossible to name." That was the first turn in the road. The woman had not fallen through the cracks of disaster. She had been pushed into them. Nathan asked for every record tied to Kepler Gate during the last 20 years. He requested the old war maps for the surrounding corridor. He asked which council offices had handled missing civilians in that region. By sunset, the answer had returned in pieces. Kepler Gate had been rebuilt after a border conflict called the Oran Containment. The council archives described that war in clean terms. Rebel logistics, security operations, population drift. The most important sentence was the coldest one. No confirmed civilian evacuation in the contested zone. Nathan read that line twice. The recorder on the table still held 3 seconds of children's voices. The first private demand from the Galaxy Council arrived an hour later. It came under the seal of the Committee for Interstellar Stability, signed by Varek Som. The Committee for Interstellar Stability had a beautiful name and an ugly reputation among smaller worlds. It did not govern by open force. It governed by delay, classification, and the threat of being labeled disruptive. A world could lose docking priority for asking the wrong question. A witness could become unreliable by being placed under historical review. A community could wait 20 years for a hearing that never received a date. Nathan knew Varek Som's work. The counselor had never been caught lying outright. That was why he had lasted. He preferred sentences that were technically defensible and morally empty. He could say a file was settled when it had merely been locked. He could say a population was unverified when the witnesses were too frightened to testify. He could call silence peace and make half a chamber nod along. The signature told Nathan something important. This was not an overactive clerk trying to tidy a disaster. A senior political hand had seen the same body, the same cloth, and the same 3 seconds of children's voices. Then he had decided the matter was dangerous enough to touch personally. Earth was asked to transfer the unidentified remains to a neutral council preservation office. The request used polite language. It mentioned safety, public calm, historical sensitivity, and the risk of inflaming old divisions. It did not mention the cloth. It did not mention the military erasure key. It did not mention the children. Nathan read the request in a secure room with 2 Earth ministers and a trade advisor who had already lost his patience. "We are not giving them a body," Nathan said. The trade advisor folded his hands. "Representative Vale, no one is asking us to abandon her. They are asking for neutral handling." The neutral office they named helped close the Orin containment file. One minister looked up sharply. "Are you certain?" Nathan sent the record to the table. 3 of its senior reviewers signed the final casualty language. They helped write the sentence saying no civilian evacuation was confirmed. The trade advisor sighed. "And if we refuse, we risk access delays through council freight corridors. You know what that does to outer colony medicine?" "I know exactly what delayed medicine does," Nathan said. "I also know what happens when a body enters a system designed to make questions disappear. That is an accusation. No, it is a risk assessment." The room quieted. Nathan looked at the ministers, then at the advisor's pale face on the display. Earth was invited into Kepler Gate as a humanitarian party. "We accepted custody of a dead person whose identity was erased with a council military key. Until we know who she is, handing her to the same structure that may have erased her is not neutrality. It is abandonment with better stationery." No one liked that sentence, but no one could disprove it. That night, Nathan found the legal hinge he needed. It was buried in the founding charter of the Galaxy Council, under an old humanitarian clause that most diplomats treated as ceremonial. The clause was simple in purpose. If unidentified remains carried cultural markers tied to a possible home community, the Council had to allow a real chance for native identification before the body could be destroyed, sealed away, or reclassified. It had been written after an ancient plague migration. Thousands of dead had nearly been burned under emergency rules before their communities could claim them. The Council had kept the clause because it made the charter look humane. Nathan intended to make them obey it. He filed Earth's answer the next morning. Earth would not transfer the body. Earth would preserve the remains under open humanitarian observation. Earth would seek the community of origin. Earth would begin a return process if the evidence allowed it. Varek Som's reply arrived in less than 10 minutes. Earth was advised not to weaponize grief. Mara read the phrase aloud in the lab and stared at the message as if it had a smell. "Weaponize grief," she said. "That is what they call not throwing someone away." Nathan stood beside the preservation cradle. "It tells us they're afraid of the story. Not the body. The body is the story." To keep that story from being swallowed, Nathan proposed a step that made half of Earth's diplomatic corps argue for 6 hours. Earth would form an honor convoy. The name was not Nathan's invention. A recovery officer used it first in a planning room after midnight. She said the phrase quietly, almost apologetically, while explaining why a standard transport would not be enough. A standard transport could be rerouted, delayed, inspected, and buried under cargo law. A public convoy would be harder to erase. Every delay would be seen. Every order would leave a mark. Every attempt to take the body into a closed room would have to explain itself before witnesses. Some Earth officials hated the idea. They feared it sounded theatrical. Nathan understood the fear. Humans had an old weakness for symbols, and symbols could become vanity if no one watched their purpose. But there was a difference between spectacle and witness. Spectacle demanded attention for itself. Witness made it harder to harm someone in secret. Nathan insisted on 3 rules. The convoy would carry no weapons beyond normal rescue defense. Its record stream would remain public unless doing so endangered a living person. And the dead woman would never be described as a tool, a banner, or leverage. She was not cargo for a campaign. She was the reason the campaign had to stay clean. That last rule mattered more than the others. Nathan had seen righteous causes become hungry. He did not intend to let Earth become another system that discovered a dead person was useful and forgot she had been real. It would not be a military escort. It would be a humanitarian transit. 1 small Earth vessel, 1 preservation cradle, 1 identification team, 1 open record stream. Observers from any neutral community willing to watch. Its declared mission would be simple. 1 unidentified dead. Humanitarian return in progress. The Council could condemn it. The Council could delay it. But if the Council stopped it, they would have to explain why the greatest political institution in the known galaxy was afraid of 1 dead woman going home. When the honor convoy left Earth orbit, it did not look heroic in the old sense. There were no battle lights, no armed formation, no grand anthem. The vessel was a white recovery ship named the Harbor Dawn, built for disaster work and family transfers. Its hull carried the Earth seal on one side and a plain black band on the other. Nathan watched Earth fall behind from the observation deck. Mara stood beside him, her hands wrapped around a cup she had forgotten to drink from. "You know they will not let us just fly to orange space," she said. "No," Nathan said, "but they may reveal how far they will go to stop us." Mara glanced at him. "That is the plan?" "Part of it. And the other part?" Nathan looked toward the preservation chamber below, where the unnamed woman traveled under soft field light. "Keep the promise." The honor convoy crossed the first council marker without incident. The second gate delayed them for inspection. The third demanded amended documentation. By then, the public stream showed every delay. Millions on Earth watched the Harbor Dawn wait in quiet space while council clerks tried to decide whether paperwork could be made heavy enough to stop a coffin. The phrase, "bring them home," spread beyond Earth during those waiting hours. Families from nearest helped posted the names of miners whose bodies had never been returned from a collapsed moon tunnel. A Selvan mother shared a voice message from a son listed as administrative loss. A pilgrim community sent a list of elders who had died during forced evacuations and been registered as population drift. The dead began to gather around the unnamed woman, not in the sky, but in public memory. On Earth, the movement became both intimate and enormous. A teacher in Denver recorded herself placing an empty chair at the front of her classroom for every child in history who had disappeared behind official language. A port worker in Lagos read the names of crew members lost in early orbital construction, names his union had fought to recover from contractor records. A grandmother in Kyoto posted a short message that reached more viewers than any government address. She said the worst part of not receiving a body was that grief never knew where to sit. Nathan watched some of these messages during the convoy's long waits. He did not watch many. He could not afford to be carried away by emotion while he was making decisions that required precision. But he watched enough to understand that the public was not simply angry. They were recognizing a pattern. Earth knew bureaucracy. Earth knew war. Earth knew how easily the powerless could be turned into language. That recognition traveled outward. Smaller alien communities began sending their own words. Some were translated poorly. Some were not translated at all. The meaning still came through. "We have a missing one. We were told to stop asking. We were told the file was closed. We were told our dead belonged to stability now." The unnamed woman had become a mirror. Every system that had lost someone to cold language saw its own grief reflected in her. That was when Leora's son sent her first message. It came through a civilian relay, stripped of all official channels. Mara found it marked as a cultural inquiry, with no origin seal except a hand-drawn symbol matching one corner of the cloth. Nathan played it in his cabin. He did not call Mara in at once. He watched the message alone the first time because he wanted to hear Leora without the pressure of analysis. There was a kind of testimony that broke if it was handled too quickly. Leora had not sent a data package to be processed. She had sent a fear she had carried for years. The cabin lights were low. Beyond the small window, the honor convoy drifted beside a dark lane marker while 3 permissions remained pending. Nathan kept one hand near the screen, as if lowering the volume could make the message safer for the woman who had sent it. An elderly alien woman appeared. Her skin had the same pale copper undertone as the body in the cradle, but her facial lines were deeper. One side of her head bore thin ceremonial cords. She looked frightened in a way Nathan had seen before. It was the fear of someone who had been told for years that speaking would only make things worse. "My name is Leora's son," she said. "I am Orin. The cloth your dead carries may belong to our Pathkeepers. We were told not to contact Earth. I am contacting you because the cloth is older than their warning." Nathan leaned closer to the screen. "Pathkeepers?" he whispered. The recorded message continued. "During the Orin containment, some of our people led children and families through maintenance routes under Kepler Gate. The council record says there were no civilians there. That is false, but our testimony was rejected. We were called unverified population drift. Many of our dead were never returned. If the cloth is what I think it is, your dead may be one of ours." The message ended with a long pause. Then Leora added, softer, "Please do not make us speak in public unless you can protect the truth after we speak. We have already been erased once." Nathan replayed that last line twice. The next morning, Varric Som changed tactics. Inside the council asteroid, Varric held his own meeting with representatives of the Vare Compact. None of them used the word Orin at first. They spoke of corridor risk, human ambition, precedent, and archive contamination. The avoidance was deliberate. Names had a way of making old decisions look less clean. One of the Compact advisors asked whether Earth knew about the strike authorization. Varric looked at him until the advisor lowered his eyes. "Earth knows a body was erased," Varric said. "Earth suspects that the erasure matters. That is enough. If the body reaches Orin recognition, suspicion may become architecture. Once built, architecture is hard to dismantle." Another delegate proposed seizing the Harbor Dawn under emergency transport law. Varric rejected it at once. Humans were difficult enough when wronged. In private, wrong them on a public feed while they were carrying a coffin, and half the minor systems would decide Earth had said what they had been too afraid to say. "We do not seize," Varric said. "We isolate. We make the route expensive. We make assistance look irresponsible. We turn their promise into a risk others do not want to share." That was how Varric preferred to fight. He did not slam doors. He made everyone afraid to open them. He did not yet block the Harbor Dawn. That would have looked too much like panic. Instead, the Galaxy Council released a formal bulletin through public stability channels. Earth, it said, was transporting unverified biological evidence through civilian corridors. The convoy could inflame historical wounds, trigger anti-council agitation, and endanger communities connected to the Orin containment. Responsible governments were advised not to assist the vessel until the matter could be reviewed in a secure setting. It was elegant. It sounded reasonable. It made Earth look reckless without naming Nathan as a criminal. Within 4 hours, 2 refueling stations withdrew docking permission. A third asked for delay authority. The Harbor Dawn slowed near the empty edge of a trade lane while Mara checked the preservation systems. "We can keep her stable," Mara said. "But the recorder is another matter. Its core is decaying. Every time we access it, we lose some surrounding structure." "How long?" "If we want to connect it to an Orin recognition system, days, not weeks." Nathan nodded. The council had given them an obstacle, and time had given it teeth. He recorded a public response from the Harbor Dawn's communication room. He did not stand before a flag. He stood beside the closed door of the preservation chamber. "Earth is not transporting a weapon. he said. Earth is transporting a dead person whose identity was erased before we found her. We have requested only one thing: the chance to learn her name before any system claims the right to dispose of her. If that request threatens interstellar stability, then the instability was already there. The message traveled farther than the Council bulletin. That did not reopen the gates, but it opened something else. Near as how, a small world with little military power and a long history of being ignored in Council budget hearings, granted the Harbor Dawn emergency humanitarian passage. Its governor spoke on a local civic channel, not a grand diplomatic stage. We do not take a position on the Oran containment, she said. We take a position on the dead. A dead person going home is not a threat to our world. The convoy may pass. Then a civilian fueling ring near Selvin opened one dock. Then a free repair platform opened a maintenance lane. Then another minor port, then another. No one declared rebellion. No one threatened the council. They simply opened doors. The public began calling it the honor corridor. Nathan watched the route grow on the navigation wall, one small light at a time. Mara stood beside him, and for once her tired face had softened. They are risking sanctions, she said. Yes, for someone they do not know. Nathan thought of the cloth, the recorder, and Leora Sen's careful voice. Maybe that is the point. The Harbor Dawn moved through the corridor slowly, because the open lanes were old, narrow, and sometimes barely legal. That slowness helped the story. At each stop, more names reached the public stream. Not just Oran names. Names from disasters, border actions, collapsed stations, and lost convoys. The galaxy had built entire categories for people it did not want to retrieve. The slowness also tested Nathan. Each stop brought a new request, a new warning, and a new family asking whether Earth could look for someone else while it was looking for the unnamed woman. He answered none of them with promises he could not keep. He had learned that hope given carelessly could become another kind of cruelty. But he made sure every request entered a public humanitarian ledger. He also made sure the ledger could not be edited by Council stability offices. That decision angered Varek's allies almost as much as the convoy itself. The ledger turned isolated grief into a visible pattern. A missing mechanic on one moon could be ignored. 200 missing civilians from 20 worlds looked like policy. 5,000 looked like history written with holes in it. Mara warned Nathan that the ledger would make the council hearing worse. They will say you are building a political archive, she said. We are building a humanitarian archive. They will not hear the difference. The public will. Nathan did not say the rest aloud. The dead would, too, if anyone could speak for them. Administrative loss. Unverified dependent. Population drift. Unregistered remains. The categories had once sounded technical. Now, spoken beside the face of the unnamed dead woman, they sounded like doors closing. Mara worked almost without sleep. She used fragments of Leora's cultural records to build a recognition bridge between the cloth, the body, and the recorder. Late on the third night, she called Nathan to the lab. I got more audio, she said. The recorder projected a broken field of sound. Static came first. Then a woman's voice emerged, strained but controlled. Line 2, stay together. Kimmy, hold your brother's sleeve. Sava, count the little ones again. No crying near the hatch. Breathe slowly. I can get you through. Children answered in fragments. Some were too young for full sentences. Then came a deep vibration, a warning tone, and the woman again. If the upper route is gone, we use the service pocket. Keep moving. I will close it after you. Mara stopped the playback. Her eyes were wet, but her voice stayed professional. The names correspond to orange child naming patterns. I count at least 12, maybe more in the damaged sections. Nathan stared at the waveform. The official council report had said no civilian evacuation was confirmed. The woman in the recorder had been counting children by name. Can we preserve it? Nathan asked. Partially, but the core is losing coherence. If Oran recognition can synchronize with the cloth, we might unlock the identity and stabilize the remaining audio. Without that, we are guessing around a collapse. How soon do we need, Oran? Soon. That was when the summons arrived. The Galaxy Council ordered Nathan Vale to appear before an emergency session in the central chamber. The stated charge was not a crime. It was worse in a diplomatic way. Earth was accused of destabilizing council space through unauthorized humanitarian theater, misuse of unverified remains, and interference with sealed historical matters. The order required the Harbor Dawn to halt until the hearing. The summons struck the convoy like a silent collision. The navigation wall dimmed as the Harbor Dawn accepted the mandatory hold. Outside, the stars did not change, but everyone aboard felt the route stop under their feet. For the first time, some of the crew looked afraid. Not for themselves. Rescue crews were used to danger. They feared the more ordinary loss, delay. If the recorder failed before the Orin Rite, the clearest proof of the children's names might dissolve into static. If the council seized legal control of the body, even a later victory might return only a sealed apology. Nathan gathered the crew in the small mess room. He did not give them a speech about bravery. He told them a plan. The Harbor Dawn would comply with the summons. The preservation cradle would remain in Earth custody. Mara would travel with the evidence. The public stream would continue until the council legally ordered it closed, and if they did, the order itself would be logged. They want us to look unreasonable, Nathan said, so we will be exact. They want us to look theatrical, so we will be plain. They want us angry, so we will be clear. One of the recovery officers asked what happened if clarity was not enough. Nathan looked around the room before he answered. Then at least the galaxy will know what was refused. After the meeting, Nathan read the summons again in silence. He could feel the trap in it. If he refused, Earth would look lawless. If he appeared without the body, the council might seize the Harbor Dawn. If he appeared with the body, Varek would accuse him of spectacle. Mara watched him from the lab doorway. What do we do? Nathan looked at the preservation cradle, then at the recorder field pulsing weakly beside it. We go to the council, he said, and we bring her with us. The Galaxy Council chamber was not designed to make visitors feel welcome. It was designed to make scale do the work of authority. The chamber hung inside a hollowed asteroid older than most member states. Rings of seats rose in terraces around a central floor. Translation towers glowed above them like cold lanterns. Each delegation sat behind its own shield of custom, color, and law. At the top, the presiding dais looked down without appearing to lean. Nathan entered through the humanitarian access door, not the diplomatic arch. He wore a dark earth suit with no medals. Behind him came Mara Ellen, 2 recovery officers, and the preservation cradle carrying the dead woman. The chamber changed when the cradle appeared. Nathan had expected hostility. He had not expected the small pockets of shame. They were there in the turned heads, the lowered eyes, and the delegates who suddenly found documents more interesting than the coffin. Some of them had voted on old files. Some had inherited the comfort those files created. Some had never asked who paid for that comfort. The minor delegations watched differently. They leaned forward. Many of their worlds had their own sealed losses, their own polite rejections, and their own memorials built without remains. For them, the coffin did not look like theater. It looked like a question that had finally become visible enough to trouble the powerful. It was not loud. There were no gasps the translator could catch. But thousands of bodies shifted at once. Counselors who had prepared to debate policy suddenly had to look at the person policy had tried to turn into a category. Varek Sam sat in the central opposition tier. He looked composed. He even looked saddened. That was one of his talents. The presiding speaker opened the session with formal charges. Earth had continued movement of unverified remains despite council concern. Earth had encouraged public agitation. Earth had introduced unstable evidence into civilian networks. Earth had risked the reopening of settled conflict records. Nathan listened until the list ended. He let the charges stand in the air because rushing to defend himself would make the matter appear personal. This was not about whether Nathan Vale had offended the council. It was about whether the council could make a dead woman wait outside her own name. Because her name inconvenienced history. When he stepped forward, he made himself slow down. Recordings of council sessions would travel across translation layers and public summaries. Every sentence needed to survive being heard by a tired worker, a parent cooking dinner, or an old Orin sitting near a wall of cords. If he sounded clever but unclear, Varek would win half the room. Then the speaker asked him to answer. Nathan stepped to the floor. He did not begin with outrage. "My name is Nathan Vale," he said. "I represent Earth in matters of humanitarian return and interstellar missing persons. Earth was invited to Kepler Gate after a civilian station explosion. In a sealed service pocket, we found a body now before you. She had no active identity, but she carried a family cloth and a damaged civilian recorder containing children's voices. Council personnel ordered her classified as unregistered remains and prepared for disposal. I refused that order. The clarity mattered. He wanted every listener to know where they were and why he stood there." Varek rose smoothly. "Representative Vale frames this as compassion," he said. "No member here objects to compassion. The issue is whether Earth may turn a damaged body into a political instrument and carry it through civilian corridors while old wounds are still dangerous." Nathan turned toward him. "Old wounds are dangerous when they are infected." A low murmur moved through the translators. Varek's face did not change. "That is precisely the kind of rhetoric that concerns this chamber." "Then let us avoid rhetoric," Nathan said. "Let us use council law." He sent the charter provision to the chamber display. The old humanitarian clause appeared in hundreds of languages. Nathan explained it plainly. "This council requires a real chance for native identification before unidentified remains with cultural markers may be destroyed, sealed, or reclassified. The body before you has such a marker. Earth asks that the council obey its own law." Varek inclined his head as if Nathan had made a child's point. "That provision presumes a credible community of origin. You have none." Nathan paused. This was the turn he had waited for. "We have one," he said. The central display opened to Leora's senator. She appeared seated in a small room on Orin, hands folded so tightly that her knuckles had lightened. Behind her was no flag, only a wall of woven cords. The chamber watched her. For decades, Orin testimony had been filed in side rooms, dismissed as unstable memory or folded in a language no one had to hear aloud. Nathan spoke gently. "Elder Leora's son, do you understand that this chamber can hear you?" "Yes," Leora said. "Do you recognize the cloth recovered from body?" Mara lifted the cloth under a light field. The pattern appeared across the chamber. Leora closed her eyes. When she opened them, fear remained, but something older had risen beside it. "Yes," she said, "that is a Pathkeeper's cloth. The central knot belongs to the sun route. The 3 marks are for children under protection." Varek stood again. "Cultural resemblance is not identity." Leora flinched at his voice, but Nathan did not interrupt. He let the chamber see that flinch. "Elderson," Nathan said, "do you know who carried such a cloth during the Orin containment?" Leora's throat moved. "Sarah," she said. "Sarah of Orin. She led children through the service routes under Kepler Gate. We reported her missing. The council record said there was no civilian evacuation. That was false." For the first time, Varek's expression sharpened. "This is unverified testimony from a historically involved party." Nathan turned back to the chamber. "That is why Earth requests the Orin recognition right, as provided under council law. The right can compare the cloth, biological markers, and the recorder's memory core. It can confirm whether the dead is Sarah of Orin." For ordinary listeners, Nathan made the issue even simpler. If the council controls the body before that right happens, the body can be sealed. The cloth can be disputed. The recorder can be called unstable. The witness can be dismissed again. The same process that erased her once can erase her twice. The chamber fell quieter. Varek moved quickly now. The chamber cannot permit an emotional ritual to substitute for evidence. "It is evidence under your law," Nathan said. "You recognized native identification systems when you wrote the charter. You cannot honor them when they flatter you and reject them when they frighten you." The sentence landed harder than he expected, not because it was dramatic, but because it was simple enough for every translator to carry cleanly. The presiding speaker called a recess. Delegations argued in closed bands. Public channels filled the silence with the image of the small coffin on the central floor. Outside the chamber, the public did what public pressure does when it becomes focused. It simplified the question without making it false. Why are they afraid to name her? Why does a coffin need permission to go home? Why does stability always ask the smallest people to be quiet? Those questions reached the chamber through aides, secondary screens, and the nervous behavior of delegates whose home populations had begun to message them in real time. Vale could dismiss Earth's representative as strategic. He could dismiss Orin testimony as interested. He could not dismiss millions of ordinary people asking the same simple question in thousands of different words. That was the thing large systems often misunderstood about moral pressure. It did not need perfect coordination. It needed a sentence that people could carry without training. Bring them home. During the break, an Earth minister spoke to Nathan through a private line. You're doing well, she said, but we have pressure from trade blocks. Some want us to accept a sealed review if the council grants corridor guarantees. Nathan looked through the glass at the chamber beyond, where Vale spoke quietly with 3 members of the Vale Compact. A sealed review means no recognition right. It may mean no sanctions. And she disappears into a room without cameras. The minister hesitated. You are already thinking of her as Sarah. I'm following where the evidence points. Be careful. Nathan's voice remained even. I am. That is why I will not trade her name for shipping comfort. The line went quiet. Then the minister said, more softly, understood. When the chamber returned, the presiding speaker announced that the recognition right would be allowed under observation. It would not be treated as final guilt evidence against any member state, but it could establish identity. Vale accepted with a gracious bow. That told Nathan the counselor still believed he could contain the result. The rite began with Leora's voice. Before she started, Leora asked for one condition. She wanted the body turned so the family cloth faced the transmission screen. The request confused several council technicians, but Nathan agreed at once. Leora explained that among the Orin, a path keeper should not be recognized by the back alone. The cloth had been carried in her hand. Let the cloth meet the home that remembered it. It was a small adjustment. It cost the council nothing. Yet the delay irritated Vale, and that irritation told viewers more than he intended. He could debate law with grace. He could mourn in abstract language. But he had little patience for the tiny acts that made a dead person specific. There were no candles, no mystical spectacle, and no ancient thunder. It was more practical than many counselors expected. Orin recognition used woven identity markers, family resonance patterns, and biological comparison preserved through community archives. The cloth carried route knots. The body carried inherited marker lines. The recorder carried a civilian memory seal. Together, they formed a pattern that could not be created by council forms. Mara connected the fields. The chamber display filled with 3 separate streams. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the cloth pattern answered the biological scan. The recorder unlocked. A name appeared. Sarah of Orin. The name did not arrive like an explosion. It arrived like a door opening after years of pressure. Nathan watched Leora read it. He watched her shoulders bend, then straighten. The chamber had taken a category from her people. The right had returned a person. For the first time since Kepler Gate, Nathan allowed himself to look at the dead woman not as an unknown case, but as Sarah. The difference was painful. It was also necessary. A name made the loss sharper, but it also made the lie smaller. Lies preferred distance. Names closed distance. Leora covered her mouth. Across the chamber, delegations that had never cared about Orin history stared at the name as if the letters had weight. The recorder began to play. Sarah's voice was clearer now. She was breathing hard, but she did not sound panicked. Kemi, hold the line. Sava, count. Little ones first. Do not look back. The upper route is gone. We use the service pocket. A child asked, will you come? Sarah answered, I will close the door after you. Keep moving toward the blue lights. Tell Leora, the path held. Leora made a sound that was almost a sob, then swallowed it because she knew the whole galaxy was listening. The list came next. Names. Child after child. Some clear, some damaged, and some recovered by Orin pattern matching. They appeared on the chamber wall under the phrase the council report had used for decades. No confirmed civilian evacuation. The contradiction was so plain it did not need Nathan's commentary. For a moment, the council chamber belonged to the dead. Then Varric rose. His voice was softer now and more dangerous because of it. No one here denies that a tragedy may have occurred. No one denies that the dead before US deserves dignity. But the identification of one Orin Pathkeeper does not establish who attacked the convoy, nor does it justify Earth accusing member powers of historical crimes. It was a careful retreat. Varric had lost the word unregistered. He had lost the right to call Sarah no one. Now, he was trying to hold the wall behind her. Nathan looked at Mara. She gave a small nod. He had held the final evidence back for one reason. If he released it too early, the council could bury it in procedure. If he released it after Varric denied the link, the denial would become part of the record. Nathan turned to the presiding speaker. Earth submits one additional recovery from the recorder. It was unstable until the Orin right synchronized the memory core. It contains background emergency audio from the moment Sarah closed the service pocket. Varric's eyes narrowed. The audio began. At first, it was only vibration, children crying farther away, and Sarah breathing. Then a weapon tone pulsed in the background. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was a code tone meant for machines, not witnesses. Mara translated the signal onto the display. Their compact strike authorization. A time marker followed, then a sector marker, then a command chain. The chamber seemed to lean inward. Nathan let the data sit there before he spoke. The council record called Sarah's evacuation route a rebel logistics movement. The recorder identifies children by name. The Orin right identifies Sarah as their pathkeeper. The recovered background signal identifies the strike system that sealed the route. This is not grief used as a weapon. This is a dead witness finally allowed to speak in her own language. Varric did not sit down. He did not speak either. The silence was more damaging than any confession. Varric's allies tried to move before the silence hardened into judgment. One requested technical review of the sound. Another suggested that strike codes could be mimicked. A third warned that the chamber was being pushed by mass emotion. Each objection sounded plausible alone. Together, they sounded like hands grabbing at smoke. Mara answered the technical questions with the calm of someone who had expected them. The code was not an external overlay. It was embedded in the damaged recorder under the same heat and pressure scars as Sarah's voice. The time marker matched the old Kepler Gate emergency grid. The sector marker matched the sealed route from the Orin reports. The command chain matched their compact weapons architecture used during the containment period. Nathan did not interrupt her. He let expertise do what outrage could not. By the time Mara finished, the objection had become evidence of desperation. Across the chamber, smaller delegations began sending requests into the public record. Nearest held demanded review of missing minors. Selvin requested reopening of administrative loss categories. 3 border communities asked whether their own sealed files had used the same language as the Orin report. The lie had not merely cracked. It had taught others where to press. Nathan could have pushed harder. There were Earth voices already calling for sanctions, corridor advantages, trade concessions, and public humiliation of every counselor who had touched the old report. He saw messages gathering on his private screen. Some came from people who meant well. Some came from those who had smelled opportunity. For the first time that day, anger tempted him. Not wild anger. A clean, sharp desire to make Varric and the Vare compact feel the weight they had placed on others. The chamber was watching. Earth held the moral ground. He could have turned Sarah into a banner and marched an entire agenda behind her. Instead, Nathan closed the private feed. He looked at the preservation cradle. Earth asked for 3 actions, he said. First, immediate release of Sarah of Orin for return to her home community. Second, public reopening of the Orin containment civilian casualty record under independent review. Third, adoption of a binding rule that no unidentified dead may be destroyed, sealed, or politically reclassified while a reasonable path to identification and return still exists. The presiding speaker studied him. Earth seeks no punitive motion at this time. Punishment can follow evidence, Nathan said. But Sarah should not have to wait for politics to finish before she goes home. Leora, Sun lowered her head. Around the galaxy, people heard what Nathan had refused to do. He had not used the dead woman as a ladder. He had kept the promise in the same shape it had held in the burned corridor. That refusal made the demand harder to attack. Varric tried anyway. He called for delay. He requested sealed verification. He warned of unrest. But the chamber had shifted. The small delegations were no longer silent. The large ones were calculating the cost of appearing to fear a woman they had already failed to name. Even those who disliked Earth understood the public balance. The motion passed in stages. The vote was not clean or noble. Several large delegations supported the motion only after attaching statements that protected their own historical positions. Others abstained while pretending neutrality. A few voted against the first action, then changed their vote when public response from their home systems turned against them in real time. Nathan watched it all without illusion. Institutions rarely became honest in one bright moment. More often, they were forced into a smaller lie, then another, until the truth had enough room to stand. That day, Sarah received enough room. The Orin received enough room. The rest would have to be fought in records, hearings, and names. Sarah of Orin would be released for immediate return. The Orin containment files would reopen under independent review. The humanitarian return rule would be drafted in binding form within the session. Varric remained standing as the vote lights changed around him. He looked older than he had when the hearing began. Nathan did not watch him long. The Harbor Dawn left the Council asteroid under live observation, but this time no gate refused it. The honor corridor widened. Stations that had hesitated before now sent clearance codes early. Some sent no messages at all, only open lanes and dimmed lights. The journey after the hearing felt different from the journey before it. Before, the Harbor Dawn had moved like a question the galaxy was afraid to answer. Now it moved like an answer many worlds were afraid to celebrate too loudly. That restraint gave the passage dignity. There were no triumphant flyovers, no victory formations, and no banners claiming that Earth had saved the galaxy. There was only a recovery ship carrying a woman home. At one old refueling ring, the crew found a line of small lights placed along the docking path. Each light carried a name submitted to the humanitarian ledger. The station master did not ask for a speech. He simply said the lights would stay until those names were reviewed. Nathan thanked him and kept the stop brief. The convoy had become a symbol, but Sarah still needed to reach Orin before the symbol became larger than the person. Orin was not a powerful world. It had thin blue seas, copper plains, and towns built low against steady winds. Sarah's home community waited near an old landing ground outside a settlement called Vale Rest. There were no grand banners, only woven cords hanging from poles, each cord tied for someone who had not come home. Nathan walked behind the preservation cradle with Mara at his side. He felt the fatigue only then, as if his body had waited until the promise was almost complete before asking what it had cost. Leora's son stood at the front of the gathered Orin. Up close, she seemed smaller than she had on the council screen, but steadier. She touched the cradle with 2 fingers. "Sarah," she said. The path held. No translator improved the sentence. It did not need improvement. The community began to speak the children's names from the recorder. Not as evidence now, not as a weapon, as names. Kemi, Sava, Rin, Talo. Little voices had crossed the service route under fire and then been buried under the phrase unverified dependence. Some of the children had survived and grown old. Some had not. Some families learned that day what route their children had taken. Others learned only that someone had tried to save them. It was not enough. But after years of nothing, even the truth hurt in a cleaner way. Nathan stood apart from the front line. He had learned not to place himself at the center of another people's grief. Mara noticed and stood with him. "You should be up there," she said quietly. "No," Nathan said. "She is home. That is the point." The Orin rite lasted until the first stars showed above the copper plain. At the end, Leora came to him with the damaged cloth folded in her hands. During the rite, Nathan had heard parts of Sarah's life in fragments. She had repaired school transport routes. She had memorized old maintenance passages because children liked shortcuts and elders forgot which ramps were safest. When the war pushed toward Kepler Gate, she had volunteered to guide families through service corridors. She knew which doors stuck and which emergency lights still worked. None of that had appeared in a council report. In the report, she had been a possibility, then an uncertainty, then nothing. On Orin, she was remembered by people who knew the way she tapped twice on door frames before opening them. They remembered the way she kept sweet root in her pocket for frightened children. They remembered how she once carried a sick boy through a flooded tunnel and apologized afterward for losing one of his shoes. That was what systems erased when they erased names. Not only blame, not only numbers. They erased the small human and alien details that proved a life had weight. "We will keep this," Leora said, holding the cloth. "But I want you to know what it means." The 3 marks were not only for children under protection. They also mean the path keeper accepts the last place in line. Nathan looked toward the cradle, now surrounded by Sarah's community. "She closed the door after them," he said. "Yes," Leora replied. "And your people opened it again." He had no answer ready for that. So he bowed his head, which was the most honest thing he could do. The review of the Orin files did not end that day. It would take months, then years. The Vale Compact denied what it could, sacrificed who it had to, and tried to survive in pieces. Verexam resigned from the Committee for Interstellar Stability before the first formal censure reached the floor. He called it a step for institutional calm. No one believed him. The more important change came in language. The new humanitarian return rule passed with a narrower margin than Earth wanted and a wider margin than Varex's allies could bear. It stated that no unidentified dead person under council jurisdiction could be destroyed, sealed, or politically reclassified while a reasonable path to identification, family notice, or native return remained. Administrative loss would require names attached where names could be found. Unverified dependent would no longer erase children from casualty records. Population drift would no longer bury a community without review. Unregistered remains would trigger a search, not furnace. The public called the rule the Sarah provision before the council could give it a colder name. Verexam never publicly admitted guilt. He gave one final address about institutional burden and difficult eras. The speech was polished, but it was too late. Sarah's voice had already crossed the chamber. The children's names had already been read. No polished phrase could put them back into silence. Earth did not become beloved overnight. Some council members called Nathan Vale dangerous. Some accused Earth of moral arrogance. Some warned that humans had discovered a new kind of influence, one that moved through cameras, families, and the stubborn refusal to let categories swallow people. Nathan heard those accusations and did not mind them much. Weeks after the return, he visited the Earth humanitarian facility beneath the Atlantic Ring. A new wall had been installed near the family waiting rooms. It held no statues, only a simple inscription in several languages, including Orin. A path home must be tried. Mara found him there before dawn. The first requests under the Sarah provision came in, she said. Notice how. Selvin. 2 border moons. A civilian archive from the old Miser evacuations. Hundreds of cases already. Nathan kept looking at the wall. Then we will need more staff. Mara gave a tired laugh. That is your reaction? It is the correct one. She stood beside him for a while. Do you ever think about what Tovin said? That no one would thank you. Nathan remembered the burned corridor, the drifting cup, the body behind the hatch, and the small recorder holding more truth than the council wanted alive. He was wrong, Nathan said. But even if he had been right, it would not have changed the work. Outside, morning light moved across the Atlantic platform. Ships rose toward the elevator ring, carrying diplomats, workers, families, and the living business of Earth. Somewhere beyond that light, the Galaxy Council was rewriting procedures it had once used to make the dead disappear. Nathan did not think of it as victory in the way politicians like the word. Victory sounded too clean. Sarah was still dead. The children had still been erased. Orin had still carried years of insult and silence. But one promise had held. A woman who had been called unregistered remains had gone home as Sarah of Orin. A list of children had been read as names, not errors. A council that feared embarrassment more than truth had been forced to change its law before the galaxy. Earth had not conquered anything. Humanity had not crushed the council. Nathan Vale had not raised a weapon in the chamber. He had only refused to let one dead stranger be thrown away. And before the watching galaxy, that refusal was enough to make Vale collapse. In the end, Earth did not win because it had the loudest voice in the chamber. It did not win because it carried the strongest weapons, or because the galaxy feared its fleets. Earth won because one human being kept a promise when forgetting would have been easier. One forgotten body was brought home. One erased name was spoken again. One quiet act of human dignity forced an entire galaxy to face the truth it had buried. Maybe that is what truly makes humanity dangerous to broken systems. Not rage, not conquest, not revenge, only the simple refusal to let the powerless disappear. Thank you for listening to this story. If it stayed with you, please take a moment to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who enjoys meaningful science fiction. And if you want more stories about Earth, humanity, and the moments when one human choice changes the galaxy, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this channel grow and helps bring more stories like this to life. Until the next journey, take care. Sometimes the smallest promise becomes the one the whole galaxy never forgets.